for my semester project, I'm talking about ELF. This is a critical lit review. I hope it is critical enough. Still, I'm still worried about that. And basically, the topic that I chose is ELF because ELF and EFL is kind of like similar, right? The E, the L, and the F. But then like they inform really different English linguistic pedagogy. So I'm wondering about that. And I have this one simple question. So what does ELF look like in Indonesia EFL? So whenever we talk about ELF, we also need to talk about what English is, as we know, because ELF coming from what English is, coming from the circles. So just revisit some of the divisional words. So what English is symbolize the functional and formal variation that ranges to linguistic context, ranges variation of English in creativity for types of acculturation in part of the Western and non-Western world, while ELF is about English as it is used as contact language among speakers from different first language. And I recently just found out that there is actually one book dedicated for ELF in Indonesia. It is edited by Zain, consisting a lot of like book chapters talking about ELF topics. And the book is actually called Teacher Education for English as a Lingua Franca Perspective for Indonesia. And actually, I reviewed 2 book chapters from this book written by Zen. And I also just want to mention a little bit about the adult study that mentioned there are 5% of English speakers in Indonesia. I have mixed feelings about that, but I cannot do anything about that. Okay, just for information. Next, the methodology. So this is a critical review. So I'm looking for the existing audit review, and then I selected involves both students and teachers, and then the research published recently, and the studies that I think at least consider as a relevant discussion about ELF and EFL. And the research design, as I said, I'm critically looking at them, and then this would be the connection between ELF and EFL, Indonesian EFL. And for the research question, I have 4 here. At first I have 3, but then I expanded to be 4. So first I'm looking at the types of ELF concept in Indonesian EFL, and then I'm also looking at the perception attitude of the teachers. At first I would like to see the teachers and students, but then I think I need to focus more on the teacher because teachers is the one who bring the changes in the classrooms, right? And then what are the potential opportunities as well as potential challenges? For the analysis, I'm using the analysis by Shi and Shannon. So here's are the findings. So when you look at this, first let's talk about type of ELF in Indonesian EFL. So as we can see, the use of code mixing, just like language, just like how pedagogy in terms of like focusing more on multilingual. So the use of code mixing is really common, right? So it's not really new. So it is okay. But then another thing I found the study talking about the articles and plurals. Even though the study is actually not in the context, in the settings of EFL classrooms, but in ELF settings, basically in United Nations, looking at Indonesian ELF speakers in United Nations, like they're like, what would you call it, diplomats. And the study looked at them and found out that Indonesian ELF speakers tend to kind of like deviate from the rules of English, standard English of using articles and plurals. They have like, they don't put the S, they don't make something like singular to plural, and they only make that if only they think it is necessary for them to actually do that. And technically I would like to have more findings on that, but I'm having trouble looking at the types of ELF somehow. Next is Indonesian EFL teachers' perceptions. So as Indonesia is EFL context, it is really strong like native speakerism norm there. So therefore Indonesian teachers, they have like separated into 2. Those who are already familiar with ELF, those who are not. But even those who are already familiar, they have this sort of like dilemma, like confused, like should I really apply this or not? Because they have been doing EFL for since like forever. This have been going on around for like generation, right? So they have that sort of like tendency and thoughts and like confusion. And then for the opportunities, I found that there are so many studies, Indonesian scholars have been trying so hard to talk about it through policy recommendations. And I found Zain has been really advocating for that. Like Zain talking about that through the argumentation of ELF is really good for Indonesia and really suitable for Indonesia. Indonesia is really linguistically diverse. As we already read in some of the articles during the readings, 700 languages in Indonesia, and that's coming from 1,000 language in ASEAN, and 700 only come from Indonesia. That's really a lot, right? So we have one official language, which is Bahasa Indonesia. We have so many different local languages across the country. And then what scholars have been trying to do is like shifting that EFL into native speakerism into ELF. and they're still trying hard to do it. But then again, there's another study from Sugihara that says like, well, you know, there is something that teachers can actually do, just directly do it in the classrooms, because teachers is the one doing the whole thing, right? So if the teacher already familiar with ELF and accepting ELF, they can actually like just do it in their classroom by not only speaking English, but actually speaking 3 different languages. Speaking English, Bahasa Indonesia, and local languages. For example, like if the teachers and the students are both aware with the local language of Japanese language, it is one of the local language and the one with the most speakers in Indonesia. So the teacher can at least just switch, jumping around between one another, like English, Bahasa Indonesia, Japanese, and then coming to English and all that, right? And lastly, the challenges. So as I said, it is really native speakerism and it's really monolithic views. And that's why teachers having this dilemma again, like for those who are already familiar and then having dilemma but already like, okay, I'm gonna do it, but they feel like, well, wait a minute, but students need to learn standardized English because they're going to take standardized tests. So what can I do about that? So again, they're having this resistance of doing that. That is why, like, at the end of the day, native speakerism in Spanish circle country, in this case Indonesia, is really strong and it's really hard to actually make this shifting. But I see that's happening. I see the scholars actually trying so hard to actually make it happen. And I'm really usually just like really pessimistic person, but for this, I'm trying to be positive, looking at the bright side, and this EFL teacher's perception. I really like this part. In short, the participants were aware of ELF and its legitimacy in an EFL classroom, and that's really a really good start point, I think. And then EFL opportunities in the EFL, there is this like English language teaching in Indonesia is considered unsustainable approach. So scholars have been trying to argue that EFL English in Indonesia is really not sustainable. So in order to make it sustainable, we need to like adapt that, we need to like adjust that to Indonesian population, which is multilingual. So yeah, just like ASU, go sustainable. Sorry. And then the discussion, just like what Galloway and Ross, and it's really interesting that I just found out that is how Galloway and Ross look like. Wow, the book that we've been reading. So I really like their quotation that all over the world, students learning English strive to imitate native English speakers, and that's what I've experienced all my life. And then now I'm getting like more exposure and more knowledge about that, and reading all these articles, and yeah, that's really true, and that's what we need to like change. And with Dr. Aya also has been really vocal about that, advocating about what English is, as well as teaching English as international language. I really like this part. Said like, it is particularly important that English learners understand that the variety that are learning is merely just a variety of English. This reminds me a lot of my prior teaching experiences. I always, when I come to the class, I ask the students, do you want me to speak in English 50% or 100%? Because I just want to like adjust with the student, right? And for those like the owner of the English course, they will say, just do 1%. Their parents want to do that. Okay, I will do it, just as your order. And then like also ask the teachers, do you want to speak like American or like British? And now I feel really bad about myself. Like, why I even ask that? Like, oh, I want to talk like British, please teach me British. I want to talk like American. And then I will like try to speak like British. It sounds fake, really bad, but I did it anyway because I only have 2 choices I give to my student. Do you want to be like American or like British? All this stuff. And I keep giving them many cultural exposure about this is how American food like, this is how British food looks like, and all that stuff. And I feel really bad about that. So taking this course really have challenged my ideology and all that stuff for the better. And this is basically the conclusion that you can read, and basically just repeating what I just talked about. This is the references. Thank you.